Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Catherine, and in today's video, I want to talk about astral projection and out of body experiences. Pretty much everything that you need to know. I have some experience with astral projection and out of body experiences, which they're basically one and the same. We'll go over the differences. Yeah, I'm not going to claim to be an expert by any means, but I do have some experience and I just want to talk about it and kind of give just an overview of everything that I know and what I've learned along my journey. I love the subject of astral projection because it was the very first thing that ever happened to me during my spiritual awakening. It's what actually launched me into a spiritual awakening because I had no clue that any of this stuff was real. It still blows my mind that out of body experiences are even a thing. I legitimately just thought I was losing my mind when it happened, but it turns out it is a real thing. There are a lot of people who experience it and many people who can just do it at will. So I think it's really exciting. But yeah, so we'll just get started. If you're familiar at all with out of body experiences or astral projection, or if you're not, rather, there is actually a show on Netflix called Behind Her Eyes. It's a fun show. And then I recently watched a movie called Astral, which both of them are about astral projection. And I thought it was kind of fun and interesting that, there are mainstream movies coming out talking about the subject. And even though when you watch the movies, it seems fictional, but it's clearly based on real events because I'm here telling you that it's a real thing because I've done it. And now, if you decide to watch any movies on Netflix about astral projection, just keep in mind that even though the subject is real, sometimes movies just tend to embellish certain things, and Astral is actually a horror movie, so they made it sound really dangerous and really bad. And some of the things that both of those shows and movies claim about astral projection just simply aren't true. But we'll go over all of that. But let's talk about out of body experiences first. So, my definition of an out of body experience is your consciousness or your soul separating from your body spontaneously. Okay, so when you have an out of body experience, or at least when I've had an out of body experience, it was never intentional, it was just something that happened. For example, the first time that I ever came out of my body, I was sleeping. I was sleeping during the day and I was getting ready to go to work on night shift as a nurse. And I woke up and I was just a few inches away from the ceiling. And I was rocking. It was like I felt like I was doing like this rocking motion, and I was very confused. I thought I was dreaming the whole time until I started asking myself a bunch of questions like, why am I dreaming about this? Like, is this my room? Why is the ceiling so close? I just kept asking myself a bunch of questions. And then right when I said, am I having an out of body experience, right at that moment I snapped back into my body. And then I physically woke up and my entire body was numb. It was heavy. I felt like pins and needles, like when your foot falls asleep. I could barely get up. It was a very physical experience. That's never happened to me before. That has that happened to me since then? So after that, sometimes it would happen spontaneously, but I've never had it happen during the day like that anymore. It was always happening when I was going to sleep, so basically at night. But yeah, I joined on my journey to understand what the heck happened to me. I ended up joining this meetup group, and it was basically, it wasn't like a support group, but just some people that were interested in out of body experiences. And so I went there. I didn't know what to expect, but basically it was just a group that liked to astral project, and they would sit around and listen to like binaural beats and see if they could do it like in a group setting. And I remember speaking to this one woman there. She was probably in her late 50s, I think. Very nice woman. She told me about the time when she had her very first out of body experience. And what she told me is that when she was like a teenager, she was driving and she got into a car accident. When her car hit the other car, it's like she blacked out. And then when she came to, she was hovering like over the car and watched the car accident happen. So she said that she could see her body, and it's like she was there, like she was awake, but obviously like her consciousness wasn't in the body, but it looked like she was awake. She just watched the collision happen, and then when it was done and everything had come to a rest, then she like ended up back in her body and like kind of snapped out of it and just realized what happened. So that was the first time. She said the second time she was on a plane, And I don't know if there was like turbulence. She didn't say that, but she just remembers floating outside of the plane and almost like flying alongside the plane and just looking at her. And again, she said that she looked like she was awake. She looked normal, but she was just watching herself. So that was one actual person that I met who had also had out of body experiences. Along my journey of discovery about this, I watched this interview of a man who said that he came out of his body during a surgery. So he was having surgery, and when he came out of it, he asked the nurse, like, hey, or she told them, he told them, I came out of my body. I watched the entire surgery. Why was the doctor doing the chicken dance? And the nurse was like, the chicken dance. And so she went and got the surgeon. And the surgeon came out and was like, what are you talking about? He's like, you were doing the chicken dance and I want to know why. And the surgeon was like, he had to think about it. He was like, I wasn't doing the chicken dance. I was keeping my hands sterile. So what this doctor would do is he would put his hands behind his back and then use his elbows to point like to his staff to grab things. And so from the patient, like looking at it, he thought that he was doing the chicken dance, I guess. But yeah, so it just kind of validated that what he was seeing was indeed happening. He just didn't understand what was happening. So then what is astral projection? Are they the same? In my personal opinion, they're both on the same spectrum, okay, but they're on different parts of the spectrum. So out of body experiences are unintentional. Astral projection is intentional. So you can actually teach yourself how to have an out of body experience at will. And so after I started having these spontaneous out of body experiences and started to learn and understand what they were, I started trying to teach myself techniques on how to do it. And sure enough, I was successful and I became really good at it. But for me, like the conditions, and I think for most people, the conditions have to be perfect. And so I'm not able to do it anymore, or at least I don't try to anymore, just because I sleep with dogs. And so they like to cuddle up on me and it's very distracting. So it doesn't happen anymore, but I definitely was able to do it. Now, I have a friend who can do it as well. He's very good at it. And in my research, I found that, astral projection dates back to like ancient Egypt and ancient Greece. I think Plato wrote some lines about like the soul leaving the body. So this is not a new concept. And actually, there are monks that practice this to this day. As a matter of fact, I think if you watch the movie Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls, I think there's a part where Ace actually astral projects to go back to the temple or something like that. So it's a real practice. I'd say, in my opinion, though, the most famous person to ever talk about astral projection or to study it is this man named Robert Monroe. So Robert Monroe, I think back in the 70s, he started having out-of-body experiences like in his mid-40s. And because he grew up in a family of academics, he decided to start researching it like on a scientific and objective level. He started to just conduct research and he ended up writing a couple of books. And so his first book, Journeys Out of the Body, it was an amazing foundation for me personally along my journey, because it made me feel like I wasn't alone and I wasn't crazy. And I really appreciated his objectivity and just his rational approach to understanding what he was seeing. Because when you astral project, at least for me anyway, when I would come out of my body, it wouldn't be so clear. It would almost be kind of like a dream state almost, except I could feel it physically. Like there was a physical component to it, which is how I knew that I was astral projecting rather than dreaming. And so he talks about like some of the things that he would see. He wouldn't try to interpret it as like on a spiritual level. He would just try to understand it on a physical level rather. So I really appreciate his work. What makes Robert Monroe so unique is that he actually worked with the US government and conducted studies with them in regards to his out-of-body experiences. So I knew that there was one experiment where they blindfolded him and put him in like a room, and they had an object and they wanted him to tell them what this object was. So they took this object, they put it in a box, and then they put it in a completely different building, just somewhere in a room. And they just told him like, okay, if you can do this, go out of your body, go to that object and tell us what it is. And he was successful. So it really grabbed the government's attention. So he ended up working with the CIA, the Department of Defense, and there are released CIA documents that you can look at in regards to his work. So he called it the Gateway Process. And the document, hold on one second. What is it called? Yeah, so the document was written by the Army, and it's called Analysis and Assessment of the Gateway Process. And so the commander that wrote this document, it's a pretty long document, and I'll link it below so you can just take a look for yourself. But it talks about out of body experiences, it talks about altered states of consciousness, and it's interesting because when you read this document, he's just speaking about it like matter of factly, and he says there's a part in there where he says there is no denying that you can come out of your body. So there's no argument, like they don't discredit him whatsoever. And I'll be honest, I actually got a little emotional when I first found this document because I found it a while ago, but it really validated everything. And it was just nice because when something like that happens to you, for me anyway, I really questioned my sanity. And I would try to talk to people about it and about my experiences. And I think people wanted to support me for the most part, but nobody really believed me. And so when I read this document, it kind of brought me to tears. And I was like, I knew I'm not crazy. So it's really good stuff. I'll also link I'll leave a link of the website to the Monroe Institute, because that is actually the institute that Robert Monroe opened up himself. It's an institute in Virginia, and it's open today. You can actually go there and they will teach you how to have out of body experiences. They just teach you different practices on how to achieve altered states of consciousness. And the way that he likes to achieve it is by using binaural beads. I did buy like a couple of MP3s from them to meditate to, and they're intense. I'm not gonna lie. I think you can definitely be successful if you follow the actual steps and take it seriously. I'm pretty sure you can achieve it if you wanted to. So if you look up astral projection, and if you try to look up any scientific studies, they either associate it to a dissociative disorder or some sort of physical abnormality of the parietal and the temporal lobes of the brain. They tend to find links between out-of-body experiences that people subjectively report and seizures, migraines, things like that. So I found one article that I found kind of interesting from the National Library of Science or of Medicine, and it was a case study of a 15-year-old boy who claimed to have out-of-body experiences, but at the same time he was running away from home and wouldn't remember doing so. And so they decided to treat him with, I think, antipsychotics, anti-anxiety meds, and antidepressants. And eventually he stopped having these out-of-body experiences, and they diagnosed him with a dissociative disorder. And so I think there's some validity to that case study, only because there's a difference between having out-of-body experiences and doing something and not remembering that you did it. So I can't tell you, I can't speak on behalf of that kid if he really was having out-of-body experiences, but yeah, I've just found that, they really try to discredit the practice. So what is astral projection really? In my experience and in my opinion, astral projection is just something that we naturally do. So we are spiritual, energetic beings first, okay? Having a physical experience. So not the other way around. We've been conditioned to believe that we are physical beings, so we're humans, that occasionally have spiritual, paranormal experiences when it's the other way. And so your consciousness or your soul is just residing within this physical vessel. But really, it's connected to a bigger network of energy. And in order to connect to that even further, you don't have to be bound to this physical body, right? Just like with other spiritual practices or metaphysical practices like telepathy, psychic abilities, right? Precognition. It's basically within the same realm because there's a collective consciousness that we are all a part of, that we're just naturally a part of, but don't realize it. And every so often we can consciously tap into the collective consciousness, which is why time and space aren't actually real, because it's all happening all at once, simultaneously. The future has already happened, right? And the past is happening right now. One example I can give you is like a memory, right? If you think about a memory, you're visiting another time and space. Your consciousness is visiting that time and space. Now, of course, we're just going to chalk that up to, us storing memory, but it goes along those same lines. Astral projection is similar to that. It's just breaking away from the physical barriers and just traveling to different places. So, and I don't know if I even mentioned it in this video, but when you astral project, you can go to different planes of existence. So you can travel around in this plane, which is what happened with me when I had the out of body experience. But then when I started astral projecting at will, I started going mostly to different dimensions. Occasionally I would fly like around the planet and in space, but more often I would go to different dimensions and just see very odd things. So to show you the power of astral projection, I always think of the burning monk. And if you're not familiar with the burning monk, his name is Thich Quang Duc, and he was a Vietnamese monk who set himself on fire in protest of the Vietnamese government, who were basically persecuting Buddhist monks for practicing their religion. And you can find the video on YouTube, and I'll show you a picture, a black and white picture, but you can find the video, and it's kind of amazing, actually. So it's this monk, and he goes into the middle of like this busy square, and he pours gasoline all over himself. And then he has a partner who helps him, and the partner takes the gasoline and like leaves a trail far away from him. And he sits there, and he sits in a meditative position. So he sits in lotus, and his partner lights him on fire, and he just sits there and doesn't move. And the video is pretty long, but it's pretty graphic. So I'll warn you right now, if you decide to watch it, it's pretty graphic, but he doesn't move. He doesn't make a single sound. He doesn't cry. He doesn't yell. The only time he moves is when basically his body is so burned and charred that he just ends up tipping over. And so this obviously made a huge impression. I mean, this became like international news, and it made a huge impression on the Vietnamese government. And so they ended up changing some things because of it. But the story goes that those monks, they ended up re-cremating him. But when they picked up his body, they found that his heart had never burned. So I think they have it like on display somewhere. I don't know if they still have it on display now, but that's the story. And they actually have a monument of him, and it's a really cool monument, and like there's fire around him. It's really cool. So I bring that up because I personally believe that he came out of his body. I mean, there's no other explanation. Like monks have been practicing this for centuries. And I mean, even though it doesn't sound logical, like that's the most logical explanation for him to being able to do that, is he just astral projected out of his body. So how do you achieve astral projection? So I'm going to make another video, like a how-to video on how to do this. But I mean, basically there are steps that you can take in order to do it. It's going to take a lot of practice and a lot of patience. I'm just going to tell you that right now, because even though it was spontaneously happening to me, afterwards, I mean, like right now, I would have a really difficult time doing it because, again, the conditions have to be perfect for me. Can't have the dogs or people sleeping in the bed with me. Can't hear any noises. I have to be sleeping on my back. The temperature's got to be right. I have to be really comfortable. Can't be hungry. It's a whole thing. But if you can achieve it, I mean, the things that you're going to see it's so sci-fi. It's really cool. When you astral project, you're going to step into the fourth dimension, meaning that like ghosts, demons, angels, interdimensional beings, aliens, like that's where you're going to be able to interact with them. You'll also be able to see other people, other humans in their astral bodies. So you'll be able to see them like achieving astral projection as well. So there are people out there who actually like astral project simultaneously and then meet up like in the astral realm. Sounds crazy, but it's true. And all of us actually do. I think we just end up astral projecting at night anyway. This is what I believe dreams really are. And again, it's all on a spectrum, okay? So the way I feel when I have an out of body experience is different than when I have an astral projection experience. And that's different from when I have a lucid dream. And then that's different from when I have a dream. I think they're all on the same spectrum of you just tapping into different space and time, but you're just experiencing them in different ways. Interestingly enough, if you astral project on this plane, so like let's say if I were to just take a nap and then come out of my body and go visit someone, you can do that. You can go creep on other people and just observe them. And I'll warn you though, of course, the laws of karma still apply when you do this. Okay, so if you're doing something that you really shouldn't be doing, just be prepared to, have that karma come back to you. But people who are a little bit more sensitive, people who can see ghosts or can feel energy or whatever, they're going to be able to know that you're there. So I always think back of all the times where I just felt creeped out. I felt like somebody was watching me, or I felt like a place was haunted. At first, I always thought that that was just my imagination. Later on, I started to actually see ghosts. And yeah, that's a whole other thing. But then I started to wonder, like, were all of them really ghosts, or are some of them like people just in their astral bodies, right? So it makes you wonder. Some of the safety concerns that come up with astral projection is going to be, I think, I tend to find a lot of these questions come from people who have a religious background, right? So people who grow up in religion tend to just believe that it's either a really dangerous practice or it's an evil practice. And I just would disagree with that just from personal experience. Now, the only way, in my opinion, that it could ever be dangerous is if you are psychologically not ready to have that experience. If you don't think ghosts are real or aliens, things like that, if you don't believe in those things and then you attempt this and you achieve it, then you're going to see these things and that will probably scare you really bad. Same thing with people who are already fearful of those things, right? If you already have a fear and then you attempt this and then you see it again, there's a good chance that it's just going to turn into an unpleasant experience. And it's not meant to be unpleasant. It's just an experience, and how you interpret this experience is going to determine, how you carry that experience with you from here on out. I think physically as well, the most dangerous thing is probably just being really drowsy and feeling like you're not getting a lot of rest, because you're just, even though the physical body is resting, like your consciousness is fully awake. And for me, it always felt physical anyway. So when I would come out of it and try to get up, I would just be so drained. And there were just times where like I would do it spontaneously when I really didn't want to. I just really wanted to sleep. So there is an energetic cord that connects your body to your astral body. And so people wonder if that cord can ever be severed, or if an entity can come into your body and possess your body. So the cord, from what I've seen and understand, is that it can't be cut. The only way it ever dissolves is when you die. And when you die is contracted. Like your soul knows when you're going to die and how you're going to die, because you already planned that out. And so when that happens, it was meant to happen at that time and in that way. So for an entity to come over and sever your cord and like take over your body, like that can't happen. No entity can come into your body as well. If that has to be contracted as well, and you have to agree to something like that on some level. Okay. So, possession and things like that, those are real, but that doesn't happen on accident. So that's not something that I would worry about. I feel that when I first started astral projecting, I was hearing voices. And over time, I learned that there were entities around me that were just either trying to intimidate me or, maybe try to possess my body or something like that. But the more I gave that attention, or the more I was fearful, the more I attracted that energy, right? So like attracts like. If you're fearful, if you're if you're constantly thinking about your body being possessed, then you're just going to attract those kinds of scenarios and situations. At some point, I was like, whatever, you guys don't scare me. I'm going to go fly into space. And as soon as I took that attitude, I stopped hearing the voices and things just stopped bothering me. And I just started blasting off and having a good time. So it really just depends on your attitude and your approach to it, on the kind of experience you're going to have. So is it worth it? Maybe, maybe not. It's going to really depend on you. For me, completely life changing for the better. Because I was astral projecting, I was able to see the truth. I could see that ghosts are real, that entities, aliens, God. This is how I learned that God was real. And so for me, that's like, I'm just so grateful for those experiences. It's completely opened my eyes and it's changed my life forever. And from those experiences, I ended up changing a lot of my lifestyle for the better. So it was 100% worth it for me. I personally haven't met anybody who felt like it was a bad thing to experience, but I mean, I'm going to have to assume that people have probably had bad experiences. It can be scary, and if you feel like something bad is going to happen to you, or that ghosts are going to be attracted to you, or something like that as a result of astral projecting, then in that case, I don't think it would be worth it. I'm sure there's probably other ways to achieve altered states of consciousness, if that's even something that you want to do. But this has to be something that you want, and it has to be something that you're going to have fun doing. I personally don't think it's dangerous, but again, if you're not mentally prepared, then it's probably just not the practice for you. What I would recommend is just having some time to yourself to really reflect on why you want to do it and what you're trying to achieve. Like, set an intention behind it. If the intentions are questionable, if you just want to spy on your neighbors, then that's probably not the best reason to astral project. If you really want to, learn more about yourself, evolve as a spiritual being, if you want to speak to your spirit guides and connect with angels, then yeah, you're going to have a blast and it's going to be so much fun. So I'll be talking more about my own personal experiences because, again, they were just completely life-changing. So I'll talk about that in another video, but thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, if this content resonates with you, then please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. I do have a website, so I will link that below. I offer energy sessions, or if you just want to talk, I could talk about this stuff all day. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.